Good evening, everybody. When I was sitting Shiva some time ago for my father, Zechron Levracha, a visitor, shared with me an insight of the Balsamtov that frankly I never heard before, and I never heard after either. And I never found a source for it. But this is what somebody shared with me. Okay, thank you. The Balsamtov, the holy Balsamtov said, he told his students that when somebody passes on, there are three legitimate and appropriate responses. Response number one is tears, grief, mourning. Response number two, silence. Response number three, to sing. So they asked the Balsamtov, Mela number one and number two, we can understand. There's grief, there's sadness, there's mourning, and there's silence. And silence really pays tribute to the mystery of it all. Vayidai Mara. But what about the singing, the music, the song? And the Balsamtov's response was that we sing to continue the song of the person who passed on, whose song was interrupted by their passing. So we sing to make sure that their melody doesn't end. And what he meant, of course, was that human life is a melody. When David HaMelech says, Ashira Lashem Bechayai, it's explained, he didn't only mean I will sing to Hashem during my lifetime, but Bechayai means with my life. I sing with my life. My life is a song. And like any great ballad, it has its ups and downs. A great ballad, a great symphony has moments of exhilaration and upliftedness, and moments of sadness and melancholy. And isn't that the song, the life, Ashira Lashem B'chayai? And when that physical life comes to an end on the physical plane, the Balsamtov says, why should you stop singing their song? You just have to start singing now. If this is true about any soul and any life, which is really a song, I think all of you, without exception, will agree with me that this observation of the Holy Balsamtov is keenly relevant to the Shloshim that is being commemorated here today. Because if in some people's life, you look at their life and you wonder, is it a song? Is it not a song? Or why is it such a depressing song? In the case of this young spirit, Chaya, whose life we commemorate but also celebrate today, you all know that it was very conspicuous to even somebody who did not know her well, that her entire life she saw it, and she made sure everybody else saw it, as one long, if nuanced, complex, deep, sometimes painful, but always lively melody. Ashira Lashem B'chayai. So I think today, I'm sure, there's sadness and grief, and there is silence. But her song is also what we should celebrate tonight, and resolve to continue that song. And therefore, I want to discuss a little bit her song. And I don't mean only the fact that she loved to sing and dance and celebrate, and was the essential life of every conceivable party, or even inconceivable party. But what that expressed, the Geist, the oomph, the passion, the fire burning in a soul. There's a prayer, there's a tefillah that we say when we ask for Geshem and Tal, we ask for dew on Pesach, and we ask for rain on Shmini Atzeres, and everybody says together with the Chazan, L'chaim v'loi lamoves, it should be for life and not for death, and the Olam screams Amen. There's an interesting question there. Namely, it says in Poskim that Aseres Yemei Tshuva, we say Zachrenu L'chaim, Melech Chafetz B'chaim. Remember us for life. For the Poskim right, don't say Zachrenu L'chaim with a pasach. Say L'chaim with a shva. Zachrenu L'chaim, not L'chaim. You know why? Because L'chaim could sound like Loi Chaim. Right? The absence of life, Chalila. So say L'chaim, to life. If you look in the Siddur, many nuschayos, including the nusach of the Balatanya, the nusach of the Arizal, L'chaim v'loi lamaves. L'chaim he has with a shva. Lamaves he has with a patach. L'chaim v'loi lamaves. It could sound like lamaves, which means v'loi lamaves, and not death. Double negative is a positive. He says L'chaim, we should say v'loi limaves, not L'chaim to lie v'loi, and not lamaves, which could sound like not death, not the absence of death, which would be the positive of it, Chalil. And one of the interpretations is very relevant to the Nifteres, namely, L'chaim already means to life. We already did it, to life. We don't have to say it, not death. What the tefillah is adding is something profound. V'loi lamaves. It shouldn't only be a life that consists of the absence of death. Meaning, sometimes when a person is alive, the definition of their being alive is that they didn't pass away. We say L'chaim, v'loi lamaves. It shouldn't be a chayim that's just not maves. It shouldn't be a life that just passes randomly. Each day is another question. If you're alive, you're not alive, you want to wake up, you don't want to wake up, you want to see people, you don't want to see people. It should be life, sucking the marrow out of every single moment of life. Experiencing life to the fullest, feeling the pulse of life in the profoundest sense. V'loi lamaves, not only the absence of maves. And in Chaya's case, it's clear to all that every day, difficult or easy, thick or thin, was a l'chaim, and not only v'loi lamaves. As somebody told me today, she was not the dying type. We say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam she'echiyanu v'kimanu v'yonu l'zman hazeh. I don't want to be a nudnik, but orders and brachas are significant. What comes first, existence or life? What do you think? Girls, what comes first? Does a rock exist? A rock exists. Is it alive? No. So you can exist and be lifeless, right? So should we say first Shekimanu or Shechiyanu? What should we say first? You thought class was over today? we should say first Shekimanu, then Echiyanu, right? First you exist and then you're alive. A corpse also exists, but it's not alive, it's lifeless. First Shekimanu, he gave us existence, and then Shechiyanu, he gave us life. The pshat is, could you thank Hashem for existence? The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam writes in his philosophical work, The Guide to the Perplexed, that if you make a fascinating observation, if you make a cheshbon of life, and you measure the moments of agony versus the moments of joy, which one do you think will outnumber which? Are people mostly happy, or are people mostly bored or anxious? In your days, present company excluded, Yiddish amamis are anxious-free, certainly in Los Angeles. But for people out there in New York maybe, If you'll count your 24 hours, how much of those times can you say you're mamish happy, you're optimistic, you're serene, you're calm, you're tranquil? And how many moments you're anxious, you're worried, you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed, you're bored, maybe monotonous, melancholy, dejected, or even in a state of agony? The Rambam says with most people you'll see that the moments of boredom or despair outnumber the moments of genuine celebration and joy. So why should you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekimanu shehechiyanu? It's not such a geschmacka thing always. That's why we start off with shehechiyanu. What's shehechiyanu? Shehechiyanu is He gave us life. Before existence comes life. We say in Ma'ariv, Kihem chayenu va'orech yameinu. Torah is called, we say in Shemona Esra, Torah's chayim va'avas chesed. That's life. He gave us life. Once He gave us life, now we are thankful for existence. What Torah accomplishes in the human life is it gives every moment meaning. Doesn't say every moment is easy. Some moments are challenging, but every moment has meaning. Every moment has purpose. Every moment has depth. Even a moment that I'm bored, even a moment that I have to deal with monotony or anxiety, that too has an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for rejuvenation. It's a catalyst, it's a springboard for enlightenment, for wisdom, for avodas Hashem. Once you say, Shechiyanu, I have chiyus, I have the chayus of Torah, now I can be thankful for Kimanu. This was her gift. Every moment she said, or sang, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehechiyanu. But how? What was the mechanism? I think if we can learn something of this tonight, we can each go home continuing her song. And I believe that for her it would be a great joy to know that her song will be continued. What did that song consist of? I don't know, but I can speculate, and I want to make a few suggestions this evening. There's a Gemara. The Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, page 31, asks a fascinating question and answers a very perplexing answer. And it's very hard to understand the answer, but I think Chaya Mushka's life explains the answer. Everybody knows that on Shabbos, you're not allowed to build. One of the 39 malachas of Shabbos is building boina. The opposite of that is you're not allowed to demolish on Shabbos. You're not allowed to be soiser. You're not allowed to destroy. You're not allowed to build. You're not allowed to demolish. But min haTorah, you're only forbidden to destroy if it's part of renovation. Just destroying something for the sake of destruction, biblically you're not liable. You have to be soiser al manas livnis. If I take that out of brick because I want to start renovating my home, then it's biblically forbidden on Shabbos, because then the demolishment has a purpose. It has a meaning to it. There's a positive twist to it. Just destruction and not chayv. The rabbis didn't allow it, but biblically it's permitted. Comes Rabbi Yossi and says it's not enough that you're demolishing a building or a home or a tent in order to rebuild. It has to be with the intention to rebuild it in the same place. In the same place. It's not enough I take out the bricks, I want to rebuild somewhere else down the block or in another city. I have to want to rebuild in the same place. So the Gemara says this doesn't make sense. Why? Where do we learn all the malachas of Shabbos from? The building of the Mishkan. Whatever they did in the Mishkan, because of the juxtaposition in Chumash between the building of the Mishkan and the prohibition to work on Shabbos, we learn that everything they did in the Mishkan, as it's part of its construction, this is what's forbidden on Shabbos. This is the definition of work. So I ask you a question. When they demolished the Mishkan, when they took it apart, was it with the intention to rebuild in the same place or elsewhere? Girls, I need you again. The Mishkan, when they took it apart, would they rebuild it in the same place or somewhere else? Somewhere else. It was transportable. It was mobile. It was a Mishkan to travel. So by the Mishkan, they took it apart in order to rebuild it somewhere else. So the definition of the malacha on Shabbos should have been the same, even if you demolish it in order to rebuild it somewhere else. So how can Rabbi Yossi say that you're only liable, you're only chayav if you want to rebuild it in the same place? So the Gemara, I think Rava gives a very perplexing answer. What's the answer? Listen to this answer. It's based on a pasuk in this week's Parsha Balsamtov when the Shloshim is being commemorated. It says that the Jews traveled in the desert al pi Hashem yisu, va'al pi Hashem yachanu. They traveled by the mouth of Hashem. The cloud went up vertically and they knew it's time to move on. The cloud went horizontally and they knew it's time to rest. So the Gemara says, since it was by the mouth and blueprint, they were guided by GPS, God's positioning system. So therefore, it's as though they were remained permanently in one place. So when they demolished the Mishkan, it was to rebuild in the same place, even though they traveled. But because they were traveling based on Hashem's plan, it's as though they're in one place. Can anybody explain to me the logic here? Just because you have God's GPS, it means you're staying in one place. I took apart the Mishkan. Where are we going? We're traveling there. We're going to be traveling for a week, for a day, for 3 days. This means I'm in one place? I'm not in one place. What's the meaning of this? So Reb Chaim Shmulevitch was the Mir Rosh Yeshiva. He said the following explanation. But this is an explanation. And some people live the explanation. And he said as follows. Reb Chaim Shmulevitch said as follows. Anybody here loves traveling? I think your daughter loved traveling, right? So it's a very appropriate metaphor for her. You get onto an airplane and you travel from Los Angeles, you travel to New York. From New York you travel to London, from London you travel to Tel Aviv, from Tel Aviv you travel to Sydney, Australia, from there you travel to Johannesburg, you're getting tired, then you go to Hawaii, and then you come back to Los Angeles. You've been everywhere, you've been touring, you enjoyed yourself, your passport has many different stamps, it's a very exciting journey for you. But what happens if you're holding an infant in your arms? You're holding an infant in your arms and you make this whole journey from Los Angeles to New York, from New York to Tel Aviv, from Tel Aviv to London, from London to Sydney, from Sydney to Moscow, whatever it is. You're in different places. Today you're in Moscow, tomorrow you're in England, the next day you're in South Africa, the next day you're in Eretz Yisrael, the next day you're here, the next week you're here, the next week you're here. And every place has its own flavor, its own experience. But what if you have an infant in your arms who's 3 months old, 2 months old, 1 month old, 5 months old? And if this infant could speak, and we know that infants speak in their own way, and you ask this infant, where have you been over the past few weeks? What will your infant answer? In mommy's arms. I haven't been anywhere, I've been in mommy's arms. Since al pi Hashem yisu, al pi Hashem yachanu, the Jews in the desert experienced themselves in the Shekhinah's arms, in their mother's arms. They were in one place. Today they were here, tomorrow they're there, next week they're here, next week they're here, they're in the same place. Command the kvilu, dummy. They're in the same place. The mother may move from here to there to there, from the child's experience. I have the confidence and stability because I'm in my mother's arms. And therefore all the changes may happen on some level. But from my perspective, I'm always in the same place. So when the Jews demolished the Mishkan, where would they rebuild it? Geographically in another place. Existentially, emotionally, experientially, in the same place. In Hashem's arms. There were 2 brothers, the Rebbe Reb Zusha and the Rebbe Reb Elimelech, students of the Maggid of Mezrich, great tzaddikim. They used to travel. Somebody once informed upon them, and they were thrown into a prison. In a cell, alone with many other Gentiles in that dungeon. The situation was so bad, there was no bathroom. You'll forgive me, there was a pail in the corner of the room that was used for human needs. They slept through the night. In the morning, Reb Zusha sees Reb Melech crying. He says, brother, why are you weeping? He says, I can't daven. According to halacha, you can't daven in a place where there's such a horrible odor, such a horrible smell. So he says, so you won't daven. Why are you crying? He says, the first time ever, since my bar mitzvah, I won't be davening. He plays a little dumb. He says, it's the first time for everything. You won't daven. He says, how can I not daven? When I daven in the morning, I create a relationship with Hashem. I create a relationship with my neshama. I create a relationship with the essence of my existence, with the essence of the world. My world is one. I don't daven, I'm scattered, I'm fragmented, I'm detached, I'm disoriented. I don't have dveikus. Rabbi Zusha turns to Reb Melech and says, I don't understand you. Dveikus with Hashem happens through doing His will. Today, Hashem does not want you to daven. The same Rebbeinu Shalom who says you should daven every day says in Shulchan Aruch that if there's a horrible smell, you don't daven. So by not davening, you're doing God's will. By doing God's will, you become connected to Him. Who says you only connect to Him through davening? You connect to Him through doing His will. Today, He doesn't want you to daven. Today, you'll experience dveikus with the Rebbeinu Shalom through not davening. You'll daven through not davening. So, wow, gewaldige Wort. So instead of crying, he starts singing. Since they were two Hasidim, so within 5 minutes they were dancing. The Gentiles see the two Chevra dancing. They get pulled into the dance. And within a few minutes, you had Purim and Simchas Torah. Right there in the dungeon. The prison warden hears this commotion. He walks in and he sees 40 people doing Kazatskas. It's a Lebedik and Freilich. He pulls over one of the goyim. He says, why are you guys dancing? The man points to the two Jews in the center of the dance and he says, it's their fault. They instigated the whole thing. As usual, the prison warden asks them, why are they so excited, these Jews? He says, I don't know. Some complicated philosophical idea. He says, tell me why they're excited or I'll put you in solitary confinement for a few weeks. He says, why they're excited? He points to the pail in the corner of the room. The prison warden says, could you explain to me rationally how that pail could make anybody smile, never mind dance? He says somehow they explained that as a result of that bucket, they developed a new type of relationship with their God. There was the pre-bucket relationship, and now there is the post-bucket relationship. And that's why they're very excited. The prison warden says, really? I'll teach those miserable Jews a lesson. He picks up the pail, he throws it out of the room. Reb Zusha turns to Reb Melech, his brother, I have to say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate. He says, Bruder, jetzt kannst du aneben davenen. Brother, now you can start davening. And when Hasidim used to tell the story, they said that there's a very profound message here. And the message is, sometimes Hashem wants a person to daven. Sometimes He wants a person not to daven. But the relationship is always there. The dveikus is always there. The intimacy is always there. Al pi Hashem yisu, al pi Hashem yachanu. They say there was a Breslov chassid once in Warsaw, pre the war. By Breslov, they always speak about emunah, simcha, betachon, faith, joy, trust. And this Jew, very wealthy man, used to get up between Mincha and Mayev every day in shul and he would scream, emunah, simcha, betachon. There was an old cynic in the back of the shul, and he never liked it. He used to tell his friends, everything is going good for him. So, emunah, simcha, betachon. He didn't really trust his words. And deep down, he felt there was, he had a great life, so why not? One day, this man had a factory of sweaters, good old Warsaw. There was a fire, the whole factory burnt down. He lost everything. Nebuch, he comes into shul that day, gets up after mincha, starts screaming, emunah, simcha, betachon. So this sinner goes over to him and says, I have to ask you, Mechila. I always thought you were showbiz, you were wealthy, you were successful, you were healthy, alles good gehabt. So why not? Emunah, simcha, betachon, who cares? I have to say, I see you're genuine, but now I want to ask you a question. Are you screaming emunah, simcha, betachon when they still didn't put out the fire on your factory? You lost everything, you were a wealthy man, now you have nothing. He told them something very profound. He said, we all know there's a halacha by Shemona Esrei, you stand. By other parts of davening, you could sit if you want, right? So by Jews, everything has to be a question. So here's the question. What if you're not standing and you're not sitting? Are you allowed to do that by Shemona Esrei? L'mashal, you're leaning on the stand azay. I'm allowed to daven Shemona Esrei like this. Am I sitting? No. Am I standing? Not quite. But I'm not sitting. Are you allowed or you're not allowed? What do you say, girls? I'm bothering you too much, okay? You're sitting in the front. So the answer is, it depends. The place can bring in Hilchas Tefillah and Hilchas Kriyas HaTorah. It depends. If you're leaning so hard on the stender, on the table, that if it's taken away you fall, then it's akin to sitting. Then you're not allowed to do it. But if you're just leaning a little bit, and even if it's taken away, you still retain your position, your stature, then you're allowed to lean during Shemona Esrei. So he looks at this Jew, he says, we all lean on different things in life, or different people in life. But I always make sure not to lean on anything to the extent that if it's taken away, I fall. There's only one thing you lean on with all your might. Everything else, lean on it, enjoy it, but don't lean on it to the point that if it's taken away, if that stender is taken away, you fall. Did I enjoy my money yet? Did I lean on my money yet? Did I lean on it to the point that if it's taken away, I fall? That not. This is what he said. And I think that what Chaya represented was commanded kviyah lehudami. You have people whose lives, thank God, are not as tumultuous as hers. They've not been through what she's been through. They haven't had the days and the nights that she endured, the disease she had to fight. And yet, they're still not happy people. They're not happy people. Sometimes you see somebody too happy and you want to know what you're taking. Like almost we expect people to be miserable. If you're miserable, Baruch Hashem. Here, say some Tehillim, kvetch, and we'll all kvetch together. What do they say? There were 3 women who once met in Palm Beach in Florida. So one says, oi! The other one says, oi vey! And the other says, oi Gott is man! The 4th one says, we made up not to talk about the kids. But she taught her environment, her friends, and anyone who came in contact with her, a different model of life. And in order to appreciate that model, I went onto the web, I wanted to read for you a few lines, because I think she lived these lines. And they're very, very heavy. It's a quote from the Tanya, the 4th section of Tanya by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya and the Shulchan Aruch. There's a section called Igeres HaKodesh, Letters, chapter 11. And I want to read for you a few lines, because I think this was her song. This was her ballad. This was her symphony. And this is what the Balatanya writes. He says, "V'zeu ikar emunah shebeshvila nivra ha'adam." This is the purpose for which a person was created. This emunah, people wonder why they were created. The Balatanya says, the reason a person was created was for this emunah, lahanan, to believe. The leis asar ponui minei. There's no space that's absent, that's vacant from Hashem's presence. And when he means space, he doesn't only mean geographical space, as in space. That too. Hashem is here, there. He means space, emotional space, even deeper, psychological space, mental space, spiritual space, physical space. No space in life, no moment, no experience, no encounter. And wherever you have the face of the king, there's light and there's life. And in his space, there's always confidence and joy. Because he's good, he's the source of good, he's the source of pleasure. And therefore, if you're in his space, you're always confident and you're always happy. Therefore, the beginning of everything is a person should celebrate Every single second, every moment. V'shah every hour. V'yichya mamash b'emunasei Hashem alechayu meitiv imay b'chol rega. And he should live with this idea, with this conviction, with this emunah of Hashem who's giving him life and therefore giving him good every second because he's the source of good. And that's why the sages of truth, the Chachmei HaKabbalah, despised depression. The worst thing by them was depression. Why? What's wrong if you're depressed? Because somebody who has a real relationship with Hashem, so every moment in life he knows, I'm a child in my mother's arms. Sometimes my mother goes on roller coasters. I don't know why. God likes roller coasters. I don't know why. Probably some people also like roller coasters. But it's not just roller coasters. They still have it. You remember we went on the Super Duper Looper? Where was that? In Great Adventures, King's Dominion, Hershey Park. For us New Yorkers, this was great entertainment. The Super Duper Looper was a roller coaster. It was pretty scary. Anybody knows what I'm talking about? I don't know if they have it still. But the Super Duper Loopers, you went on, and you went up, and then you went down, but then you went upside down 3 times in a row, and very, very fast. It really shook up the system. Now, for young boys, it was a moment of liberation, and exhilaration, and freedom, and whatever it is. They had another amusement park, a Meshuggah ride, but people still loved it. I don't know why. It was called Free Fall. Free Fall is the pshat. You get into a car, you go up on a pillar, mamish close to the moon, and then you go a little straight, and then you drop, but you don't drop on a slant. You drop mamish like a cliff. In a second you drop, and your heart is supposed to collapse completely. And then that's called fun, the fun of the day. Huh? The mic? I don't know how to do these things. I usually try to stick to what I'm good at. So the infant's mother or father may go on roller coasters. I don't know why. I don't think anybody knows why. But the infant, I'm in my mother's arms. Al pi Hashem Yisrael, al pi Hashem Yachenu. Today I may be here, tomorrow there, next year here, up, down. Life is very complicated and tumultuous. In Chaya's life, I think part of her song was, she breathed this. She lived this. So therefore, every moment was a party. Every moment was an opportunity for celebration. She didn't feel she has time to get sad, to become a victim, to feel bad for herself. Somebody sent me a text that when he visited her in the hospital, she had these signs or cards that she wrote, "Thank you very much for visiting me." And he took one home, and he has it now in his library, and he hung it up there. And he tells me that he hung it up because it reminds him about life. Here's a girl struggling terribly physically, and nonetheless, every visitor that comes, she's focused on making that person feel good, celebrate. These nice designs with her calligraphy and nice handwriting. Thank you for coming to visit me, with some very nice gestures of love and affection and so on and so forth. What's the secret here? What's the song? Al pi Hashem Yisu, Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Kaman dekvi Elohu Dami. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that David HaMelech says to Hillel, you know who else started to praise Hashem? Nebuchadnezzar has a beautiful shira in the book of Daniel to God. Beautiful song. So the Gemara says that Nebuchadnezzar started to sing to Hashem, and a malach came and slapped him on his face. And the Gemara says that the malach wouldn't have slapped Nebuchadnezzar in his face, he would have continued singing, and his singing would have eclipsed David HaMelech's song. So I ask you a question. Nebuchadnezzar the Russia, his shira would have eclipsed the book of Tehillim. Does that make sense? It seems so strange. It says in Tehillim, LeDavid Mizmar Chesed u'Mishpat Ashira. So the Gemara says, Chesed Ashira, Mishpat Ashira. There's moments of Chesed, there's moments of Mishpat. There's moments of Midas HaChesed, there's moments of Mishpat, of Midas Hadin. He sang. We say Mizmar Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, Toiv L'Hoides L'Hashem, U'Lezamer L'Shimcha Elyon. The mic doesn't like what I'm saying. Lahagid Ba'Boiker Chazdecha Ve'emunascha Ba'Leilos. So the Hilek Yerushana said, there's Boiker and there's Leilos. There's morning and there's night. Ba'Boiker in the morning, we could speak about Chazdecha. What about Ba'Leilos when it's dark? We can't speak about Chazdecha. One doesn't see Chazdecha. Then we speak about Ve'emunascha Ba'Leilos. There's the emunah of the Jew that comes out at night. A person who lives with that conviction, that leis asar ponim minei, there's no space vacant of him. That means every moment in psychological turmoil, in struggles with children, in struggles with yourself, with your life, every moment, morning and night, boredom, monotony, anxiety, optimism, pessimist, whatever it may be. I'm being held. I'm being held in my mother's arms. And if my mother is right here, the Shekhinah is right here, so there's meaning, there's purpose, there's goodness, there's depth. In his presence, there's always confidence and joy. If there's a lack of confidence and joy, then I'm not in his presence. I'm detached. I'm in my own delusional orbit. If you're in his presence, two things. You're confident, you're not afraid, and you're joyous. This was this little girl, Chaya Mushka. She was in his presence, in Hashem's presence. Therefore she was confident, quite way and above people even older than her. Very confident. But together with confident, sometimes people's confidence doesn't come together with joy because it's not real confidence. It's a fake, delusional, macho type of security. Her confidence came with a deep sense of chedva, of life, like her name, Chaya. A very powerful sense of life, of vitality. And you know, journeys are mysterious, very mysterious. We know almost nothing. We understand almost nothing. When Moshe is introduced the first time to Hashem to become the leader of the Jewish people, what does he see? He sees a bush burning and not being consumed, and he wants to come close. Hashem says, "Shalna alecha me'al raglecha, ki hamokem asher ata omed alav admas kodesh." Remove your shoes off your feet because you're standing on holy soil. What's the meaning of this? Hashem revealed himself to Adam, Noach, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rivka, Lavan, a lot of interesting people. Nobody saw this burning bush, only Moshe. Because when Moshe was about to redeem the Jewish people to become the first Rebbe, it says in Medrash, he saw the Jewish people burning and not being consumed. And he goes over, he says, I want to understand. Asura Nava'era. The Rebbeinu Shalom tells him, take off your shoes off your feet, because you're standing you're standing on sacred soil. Take the shoes off your feet, you're standing on sacred soil. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu, whenever you're standing in front of a person who's been tested by life, take your shoes off your feet. You're standing in front of Kedusha. Sometimes people are standing in the presence of pain and they feel the need to philosophize, to theologize, to explain, to rationalize. Take your feet off, take your shoes off your feet. You're standing in front of Kedusha. People who have been through painful experiences in life live on a different plateau. It's called a plateau of holiness, of sacredness. And in front of Kodesh HaKadoshim, you're not a philosopher. You take your shoes off with humility, with sensitivity, with empathy. Chaya Mushka's journey was a very mysterious journey. One, I think we understand very little of. What we can do is take our shoes off our feet. A journey of such a girl is sacred. It's transcendental. Her passing is certainly a mystery, but if I may say, her birth was also a mystery. Because her journey was a mystery. Her gift was a mystery, something unique, something priceless, something beyond. And when you observe such a mystery, you take your shoes off your feet. And I think tonight it's important to acknowledge. It says in Sfarim that before a soul comes into this world, especially a struggling soul, it chooses where it should be born. Who should be its mother? Who should be its father? It's hard for some of us to believe that we choose these things in heaven. Because many people grow up and say, oh, if I only had this family, that family, that family. But it's not pashut. Everyone has the mother they're exactly supposed to have, the father they're supposed to have. Nobody's perfect. But every soul has its journey. Chaya Mushka wasn't just a joyous soul, she was the epitome of joy. And before she was born, she chose her mother and her father to be the ones who would raise her, bring her into the world, and shower her with so much fun and love and affection and nurture throughout her 11 too short years. And the fact that such a great soul chose Hadassah Menachem Mendel, my dear friend Mendy, as her parents, together with her siblings, together with the grandparents, and close family members, and relatives and friends, demonstrates the great gratitude that the community pays tonight to her mother and father, to Hadassah Menachem Mendel, for being the Shloshim to bring such joy into the world, to bring such a neshama into the world, and to share such a beautiful soul, a soul of Chaya, a soul of life, and a soul of Mushka, which means fragrance. Fragrance. There's people that wherever they go, they impart a fragrance of delight, of joy to their entire environment. And the years that you invested in her, to give her everything that she needs and she wants, and to give her everything in Gashmias and in Ruchnias, especially in the last difficult tkufa of her life, that could never be taken away. That's eternal. A Yid called me yesterday. My friend Rabbi Yaakov Rosenblatt calls me, and he says that my daughter Rina was a very close friend of hers. So I asked him, how did she take to her passing on Pesach Sheni? So he tells me that his daughter told him that whenever I was around her, I became happy. She made sure if you were near her, you were happy. She made sure. How? Because she was happy. And happy people make other people happy. Young girls have deep perception. Happy people make other people happy. So she continued. And now I know she's in Gan Eden, so she's certainly happy. So I shouldn't be happy. She's certainly happy, so I shouldn't be happy. You know, people often ask, how do I make my children happy? You don't make your children happy. You make yourself happy. If you're happy, the people around you will be happy. If you're miserable, probably everybody around you will be miserable. She was happy. She understood that life is too short and too precious to use it to be angry, depressed, melancholy, dejected, and think that the whole world is a bunch of criminals, especially people in your own family. She didn't have time for pettiness. She was too big. When you're in God's space, you're happy. When you were in her space, you're happy. How? Because she was always in God's space. And when you're in a God's space, that's what the Balatanya is saying. This doesn't mean life is flat. Her life was not flat. It was up mountains and down valleys, like in the Midbar. But yet, she was in her mother's arms. And when you're in your mother's arms, in your father's arms, in Hashem's arms, you may go up mountains and down valleys, you're always stable. You're always in a state of confidence. Sometimes you have to hold on tight, and sometimes you got to fasten the seatbelts. But there's a stability, there's a wholesomeness, there's a confidence. Hamayim min lo yochush, says the Alter Rebbe. Hamayim min lo yochush al kain hichiku chachmei ha'emes ha'atzvos b'moi. That's why the sages of truth can deal with a lot of things, but depression not chemically, depression in the sense of moods, of melancholy and downtroddenness and bringing everybody down, beginning with yourself. This didn't have a place in the world of people who celebrated genuine Yiddishkeit, not just institutionalized religion, which can get you even more depressed. I want to tell you a Maisa that I read that I think Mamesh sums up. I'm not going to say sums up. It captures something so powerful about Chaya's life. And I like mentioning his name because he has a special schus in Jewish history, even though he wasn't Jewish. There was an Italian fellow, an Italian Gentile. His name was Arturo Toscanini. Sounds like a real yeshivish name, no? He was an Italian composer, brilliant musician. First of all, he had a photographic memory. He had a keen sense of music. He was one of the greatest directors of the last generation. I think he died in 1959. He has a special schus in Jewish history, and I'll tell you why. As an introduction to the story, in the 1930s, Hitler, Yamach Shemai, when he became the Führer of Germany, one of the first things was all the great Jewish musicians of Germany and Austria were fired. Later, Austria, when it was annexed. And many of them remained without jobs, prestigious talents. Jews in the 18th and 19th century and beginning of 20th century were great artists of music in Austria and Germany. And Toscanini, who was a world-renowned director and composer, told all these Jews, go to Eretz Yisrael, what was called Palestine, and under his direction, he created what was called then the Palestine Philharmonic Orchestra, giving all these Jews a job, and he directed the first one and gave it its prestige. And today it's the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra. It all began with Toscanini in the 1930s, and for this I say Zachal Atoiv. His biographer writes this story. What a lesson. His biographer was writing his biography, great talent, calls him up one day and says, Arturo Toscanini, can I come visit you tonight? He says, no, tonight I'm busy, we can't talk. So he says, what's up? What are you doing? He says, I used to direct a symphony overseas, and I delegated it to somebody else, and tonight they're playing, and I arranged to be able to hear it through shortwave radio. You don't know what shortwave radio is, but this is before the days when you had the World Wide Web. Shortwave radio, I'm going to hear the symphony. So the biographer understood, this is a moment you don't want to miss. So he tells him, can I come listen? Can I come watch you listen to your symphony? He says, yeah, but condition you don't say a word throughout. I have to listen. Fine. The biographer writes this. He comes to his home. The symphony begins. He's listening to it through the radio. It goes for, let's say, 2 hours. It finishes. The biographer tells Toscanini, innocently, he says, wow, that was beautiful. That was amazing. Toscanini says, no, it was pretty lousy. He says, why do you say so? Toscanini says, 210 musicians were supposed to play, only 209 showed up. 15 violins were supposed to play, only 14. He looks at him, he thought, the ganze Meshuggah. He's listening on the radio and he knows that 209 musicians showed up instead of 209. He thought he lost it. The next morning he goes and he phones the director of the symphony and he says, I'm just wondering, how was it last night? Did all the musicians show up? He says, no, 210 were supposed to come. We were missing one. Which instrument was missing? He said it was supposed to be 15 violinists. We only had 14. He comes back to Toscanini and he says, can you explain to me how in the world you knew from listening to music on the radio that 14 violinists showed up instead of 15? How did you know that? Toscanini said, I told you last night that it was a lousy performance. He said, how did you know it was missing? He looks at him and he says, that's the difference between you and me. You're part of the audience. I wrote the music. And when I wrote the music, I wrote it in a way that it needs 15 violins to be able to play every note. And last night I was listening to it and not all the notes were met and I knew that a violin was missing. Because when you write the music, every note is accounted for. There's two ways of looking at life. From the audience's perspective and from the composer's perspective. From the audience's perspective, we don't always value every note. We don't value every person. And we don't value within our own lives every note. Chaya, whose Shloshim we commemorate this evening, had a different perspective on life. She viewed life from the composer's perspective. She was in his space. And in his space, every note is accounted for. Every day is an opportunity for tremendous celebration. Every person is an indispensable note in the cosmic symphony. And every single experience is just another opportunity to dance. So I think the way she saw life was an incessant opportunity not to stop dancing. So if the Balsamtov said you can cry, you could be quiet, or you could sing, I think tonight we can add a fourth option is you can dance in order that her dance does not get interrupted, but it continues, it resonates in the hearts and the minds of not only family, which I know it will, but friends, relatives, community, and all those touched far and close, from near and far, touched by her smile, by her magic, by her grace, by her passion, by her fire, by her glow, and by her insistence that to live means to sing and to dance. Thank you very much.